They would later say it was impossible to see the tragedy coming. In every picture from that trip, the couple looked untouched by fate, smiling, relaxed, glowing with the careless joy of people who still believed that love alone could protect them. What no camera captured was the quiet countdown already ticking beneath those smiles. Some disasters arrive like storms. Others arrive like vacations. Ethan and Claire had been married for exactly 12 weeks when they landed in Europe. Newlyweds in every sense of the word, they carried matching passports, shared playlists, and a future they spoke about with certainty. They believed in planning, in effort, in love as a structure strong enough to hold anything. Europe was not an escape for them. It was a celebration of having done everything right. Their honeymoon itinerary read like a dream designed by someone who had never known loss. Paris for romance, Prague for history, and finally a smaller city nestled between old stone buildings and winding rivers. Claire loved places like this, cities that felt alive with stories. Ethan loved watching Claire discover them. He often said that her excitement made the world feel new again. On their third night in the city, they booked tickets to an outdoor concert near the old town square. Music echoed through the streets that evening, blending with laughter and clinking glasses. Claire wore a light summer dress, her hair loosely pinned, her wedding ring catching the golden light. Ethan couldn't stop staring at her, amazed that this was now his life. They returned to the hotel to change before the concert. That was when Claire paused, her hand gripping the edge of the bed. A sudden wave of dizziness washed over her, sharp enough to steal her breath. Ethan noticed immediately, moving toward her with concern. She laughed it off at first, insisting it was nothing, just travel fatigue, maybe the heat. But the feeling didn't pass. Claire sat down, pressing her palm to her stomach, her face pale despite her smile. Ethan suggested skipping the concert, offering to stay with her. She shook her head quickly, more firmly than he expected. "You've been excited about this all day," she said. "I just need to lie down for a bit." Ethan hesitated, torn between worry and trust. Claire had always been strong, independent, unwilling to let small things control their plans. She kissed him gently, reassuring him again that she would be fine. "Go," she said softly. "I'll be right here when you get back." Those words would echo in his mind long after the music faded. The hotel room grew quiet after he left. Claire lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, telling herself she had made the right choice. Couples needed space, she believed. Love meant not holding each other too tightly. She closed her eyes, listening to distant sounds from the street below, letting exhaustion pull her under. She woke sometime after midnight. At first, Claire thought she was still dreaming. The room felt wrong, too still, too heavy. Then she heard it, a sound near the door, faint but unmistakable. Her heart began to race before her mind could catch up. She sat up slowly, fear spreading through her chest like ice. What followed happened quickly, violently, and without logic. The robbery was chaotic, voices she didn't recognize, hands she couldn't escape, fear that swallowed her whole. Jewelry was taken, drawers pulled open, the room turned unfamiliar. And then something worse happened. Something that shattered her sense of control entirely. When it was over, Claire was left alone in a room that no longer felt like shelter. She sat on the floor for a long time, unable to cry, unable to scream. Her body felt distant, as if it belonged to someone else. Trauma, she would later learn, doesn't always announce itself with noise. Sometimes it arrives as silence. She showered until the water ran cold, scrubbing her skin as if memory could be washed away. She dressed mechanically, choosing clothes without caring what they looked like. When Ethan returned hours later, excited and apologetic, she forced a smile that felt like it might break her face in half. He talked about the concert, the music, the crowd, how he wished she had been there. Claire listened, nodding in the right places, laughing when expected. Inside, something had already closed off. A door had shut, and she didn't yet know how or if it could ever be opened again. That night, as Ethan slept beside her, Claire stared into the darkness. She thought about telling him. She imagined his face, the shock, The guilt. The rage. She imagined the questions she couldn't answer and the pain she couldn't undo. Fear wrapped itself around her thoughts. Tighter than any embrace, Claire waited until Ethan left the room the next morning. He had gone downstairs to bring coffee, still unaware that the world he trusted had already cracked. As soon as the door closed behind him, her hands began to shake. The silence felt unbearable now, louder than any scream she had held back the night before. She locked herself in the bathroom and sat on the edge of the tub, phone clutched tightly in her palm. For a moment, she considered calling the police. The thought lasted only seconds before fear swallowed it. Foreign country, strange city, endless questions. She didn't feel strong enough to relive the night out loud. Instead, she called her best friend back in America. The moment the call connected, Claire broke. Words poured out in fragments: robbery, fear, shame, confusion. She avoided certain details, but the truth was clear enough. Her voice cracked as she spoke, as if saying the words might make them permanent. On the other end of the line, there was silence, then a sharp intake of breath. Her friend didn't scream or cry. She spoke carefully, cautiously, like someone walking across thin ice. "Claire, you need to think," she said. "About your marriage, about your future." Claire felt her chest tighten. This wasn't the comfort she had hoped for, but she listened anyway. "If you go to the police, this will never end," her friend continued. "And if you tell Ethan, men don't always handle these things well." The words landed heavily. Claire imagined Ethan's face again, hurt, confused, distant. The idea of losing him felt unbearable. The fear of being blamed, even silently, terrified her. Her friend lowered her voice. "Some truths destroy more than they heal," she said. "Maybe this is something you bury, something you survive quietly." She suggested Claire treat it like a nightmare, something unreal. "Forget it," she said gently. "Protect your marriage." When the call ended, Claire sat frozen, phone resting in her lap. She hated the advice, but part of her clung to it. Silence felt like control. Silence meant nothing had to change. She told herself that survival sometimes meant choosing the least painful lie. Ethan returned with coffee, smiling, unaware of the decision that had just been made without him. Claire thanked him, forcing herself to meet his eyes. She smiled back, practicing a version of herself that could function, laugh, and move forward. That version would become her armor. The rest of the trip passed like a blur. Cities blurred together, landmarks lost meaning. Claire followed schedules, packed bags, nodded at conversations. At night, she lay awake beside Ethan, counting the seconds between breaths. She learned how to disappear without leaving. When they finally flew back to the United States, everyone welcomed them with questions and excitement. Friends asked about Europe, about romance, about memories. Claire told safe stories: the food, the streets, the music. No one noticed how carefully she avoided the rest. Weeks passed. Life resumed its rhythm. Ethan returned to work, energized, grateful. Claire tried to return to herself, but her body resisted. She grew tired easily. Food made her nauseous. Mornings became battles. Ethan watched her with growing concern, sensing something was wrong but unable to name it. One afternoon, when Claire nearly fainted in the kitchen, Ethan insisted they see a doctor. She didn't argue. A quiet dread settled into her stomach as they drove, a feeling she couldn't explain. Some part of her already knew that silence never stays buried forever. The doctor's office smelled clean and bright, nothing like the darkness Claire carried inside. Tests were done quickly, routinely. When the doctor returned, she smiled warmly, turning toward Ethan first. "I have good news," she said cheerfully. "You're going to be parents." Ethan's joy was immediate and overwhelming. He laughed, hugged Claire, thanked the doctor repeatedly. In his happiness, he didn't notice that Claire hadn't smiled. Her world tilted, reality reshaping itself in a way she hadn't prepared. For as Ethan talked excitedly about names and plans, Claire stared at the floor. Inside her, panic bloomed. She knew where this pregnancy came from, and she knew she had never wanted it. The secret she had buried was no longer silent. It was growing. By morning, Claire had made her first terrible decision. She would say nothing. Ethan couldn't stop smiling on the drive home. His hands gripped the steering wheel with excitement, already planning a future that now felt brighter, fuller, complete. He talked about buying a bigger apartment, about weekends in the park, about becoming the kind of father he never had. Claire listened quietly, her heart heavy with a truth she could not place anywhere safely. That night, she sat alone on the bathroom floor, staring at the pregnancy test the doctor had given her. To take home. 2 clear lines stared back, undeniable. She pressed her hand against her mouth to keep from crying out loud. This was not how motherhood was supposed to begin, not in fear, not in silence, not in stolen choice. She thought about ending the pregnancy. The thought came uninvited, but stayed stubbornly present. It felt logical, controlled, final. But every time she imagined telling Ethan, her chest tightened. His happiness felt fragile, like glass she would shatter with a single word. And beneath that fear was something deeper, shame she did not believe she deserved, yet carried anyway. Days turned into weeks. Claire's body changed while her mind resisted. Ethan attended appointments proudly, holding her hand, showing ultrasound pictures to family and friends. Claire smiled for photos, nodded at congratulations, and learned how to exist in 2 worlds at once. One where she was a loved wife and future mother, and another where she was still trapped in a hotel room across the ocean. At night, memories returned uninvited. Sounds, shadows, fragments of fear. Claire learned how to breathe through them without waking Ethan. She told herself that enduring was strength, that protecting him from the truth was love. The line between sacrifice and self-erasure blurred more each day. One evening, Ethan noticed her crying silently in bed. Alarmed, he asked what was wrong. Claire hesitated, then blamed hormones, exhaustion, fear of change. He believed her easily, pulling her into his arms. His comfort felt real, and that somehow made the lie heavier. As the pregnancy progressed, the doctor grew puzzled. Measurements were unusual. Tests were repeated. Sometimes nature surprises us, the doctor said lightly. Claire felt her pulse quicken at those words. Surprise had already ruined her once. Then came the confirmation. Twins. Ethan was overjoyed. Beyond words. He laughed, cried, called his parents immediately. Twins felt like a miracle to him, proof that life was generous. Claire sat quietly beside him, hands folded protectively over her stomach, dread spreading through her like a slow-burning fire. She had not even processed 1 child. 2 felt unbearable. That night, alone again, Claire stared at her reflection. In the mirror, she barely recognized the woman looking back, older, quieter, fractured. She whispered a question she had avoided for months. What happens when the truth can no longer hide? She didn't have an answer. All she knew was that time was moving forward, indifferent to her fear. And whatever was coming next would not allow silence to survive much longer. Part T4. The COT. Claire's body had grown heavy, her movements slow. Each step reminding her that the future she had not chosen was now inevitable. Ethan talked about baby names, cribs, and nursery colors as if the world had already shifted to this new, perfect rhythm. Claire nodded, smiling softly, but inside, her mind churned with dread she could not share. At night, she lay awake listening to Ethan's soft breathing, feeling the twins move inside her. Every kick, every flutter, reminded her that life had pressed forward without asking her consent. She wondered if she could ever reclaim the part of herself that had existed before Europe, before the robbery, before this impossible secret. Her thoughts drifted back to that night, the hotel, the fear, the silence that had saved her marriage, but fractured her soul. She questioned herself constantly. Had she done the right thing by hiding the truth from Ethan? Or had she just buried the pain, letting it grow inside her, twisting her happiness into guilt? The doctor's appointments became more frequent. Ultrasounds revealed 2 tiny faces, 2 tiny hearts. Ethan was ecstatic, holding her hand as tears formed in his eyes. He called them miracles, blessings, gifts from life itself. Claire smiled at him, a practiced smile, while panic lingered in the background like a shadow that refused to leave. Family and friends called, eager to know about the pregnancy. Claire responded with careful words, avoiding stories of fear. Ethan beamed beside her, oblivious to the storm inside her. The contrast between his excitement and her quiet dread created a growing distance, one she could neither bridge nor explain. Sleep was hard. Dreams often returned to that European hotel room, the fear and violation mingling with the looming responsibility of motherhood. Each morning, she woke exhausted but forced herself to keep smiling. She told herself she had no other choice. The alternative was chaos, a life unraveling beyond repair. One evening, she finally admitted to herself that she could not live in two realities at once. She would carry the twins. She would protect Ethan's joy. And she would endure, silently, the memories that refused to fade. In that quiet surrender, a strange clarity emerged. She could not undo the past, but she could control the present, no matter how painful. Even as the months passed and the twins grew strong inside her, Claire felt a tension tightening her chest. Joy and terror coexisted in every heartbeat. The end was approaching. The moment she would give birth, and the truth would collide with reality in ways she could not yet imagine. The day of delivery arrived with a tension Claire could almost touch. Ethan paced the hospital corridor, his excitement bouncing against the walls. He held her hand through the early contractions, whispering encouragement, imagining the first cries of their children. Claire smiled at him, forcing her body to respond with enthusiasm she did not fully feel. Inside, Claire's mind was elsewhere. Each contraction reminded her of the twins growing inside, and the secret she carried. She wanted to scream, to tell Ethan everything, but fear and instinct kept her silent. Every doctor's instruction, every nurse's question, she answered calmly, hiding the storm beneath practiced words and a trembling smile. Hours passed. Ethan watched in awe, holding her hand, talking to the babies as if he could already feel them moving in her womb. He was so proud, so hopeful, so completely unaware of the internal war Claire fought. She admired his joy but also hated the way. It made her feel like a traitor, a silent keeper of an unbearable truth. Finally, the moment arrived. Claire pushed, her body straining, her mind screaming for relief. Time slowed. She imagined leaving the hospital and vanishing somewhere, free of the consequences she feared. But reality refused escape. Two cries pierced the room, strong, loud, undeniable. Twins, alive and perfect, each wrapped and handed to Ethan immediately. Ethan's face lit with joy beyond comprehension. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he held the two babies, marveling at their tiny hands and fragile fingers. "They're perfect," he whispered. "We made them." Claire forced herself to smile, tears streaming silently, masking a mixture of awe and terror. These children were innocent, and yet they carried a truth she could never tell. Then, as the nurse helped him adjust the babies for a photo, Claire saw something that made her chest collapse. The twins' skin was dark, their features unmistakably African. She felt her stomach drop. Shock, fear, and panic collided inside her. How could this be? How could the secret she had buried now stare back at her in such an undeniable way? Ethan noticed her sudden pale expression. "Claire, look, aren't they beautiful?" he said, lifting the babies toward her. But Claire could barely nod. Inside, questions raced too fast to name. Her silence now felt like it had failed. The truth, the fear, the hidden trauma, it all pressed forward in an impossible weight she could no longer manage. As Ethan continued smiling, talking to the babies, celebrating their lives, Claire realized something painfully clear. The world she had tried to protect, her marriage, her life, her secret, was now fully exposed. She could endure this birth, but what would happen next? How would Ethan react when he noticed that the miracle he celebrated had origins he could not understand? Part 6, Climax Conclusion. Part 6, Truth. Ethan held the twins close, his smile fading as he noticed the differences he hadn't expected. His joy faltered, replaced by confusion, then a sharp sting of disbelief. He looked at Claire, searching her eyes for an explanation he wasn't ready to hear. "Claire? How?" His voice trembled, a mixture of hurt and anger. Claire's throat tightened. The truth she had buried for months was now unavoidable. She tried to explain, but the words refused to come out. Her hands shook as she reached for Ethan, silently begging him to understand without hearing the horror. She wanted to say it had not been planned, that it was the result of choices she had never imagined, but the weight of the secret crushed her courage. Silence became both shield and prison. Ethan stepped back, confusion giving way to raw pain. "Did this happen? Because of you?" His voice cracked, not fully accusatory but full of disbelief. Claire shook her head, tears flowing freely now. "It wasn't. I couldn't." Words failed her, fragments falling into the tense air between them. The room, once filled with joy, now felt impossibly heavy. The nurse and doctor gave space, understanding the tension, but leaving the couple to their unraveling. Ethan's face darkened as anger and sorrow intertwined. "I trusted you. I believed in us. And now this?" He gestured helplessly at the twins, their tiny faces innocent but triggering a storm neither of them could yet name. Claire's heart shattered at his pain, knowing she could not fix this with anything but honesty, and she wasn't sure honesty would help. Hours passed with silence. Ethan alternated between holding the babies and pacing, while Claire sat quietly, exhausted in body and spirit. She realized that some things, once done and buried, could never truly be erased. Love, she thought, could survive many things, but could it survive the weight of secrets that pierced its foundation? Finally, Ethan spoke again, calmer but still trembling. "I need to understand everything." Claire took a deep breath, every nerve screaming, and slowly recounted the European trip, the robbery, the violation, and the choice to stay silent. She explained the fear, the advice from her friend, and the months of internal struggle. Each word felt like a knife, cutting through the fragile trust between them. Ethan listened, eyes widening with shock, disbelief, sorrow, and a tinge of understanding. His mind wrestled with betrayal, love, and the innocence of the twins. They were alive, and yet, to him, the world had shifted irreversibly. Claire watched him struggle, silently praying that their love, however damaged, could find a path through the wreckage. By the end of the night, words could no longer capture the complexity of their emotions. Ethan held the twins, whispered their names softly, then turned to Claire. Tears fell from both of them. "I don't know if I can forgive it all," he admitted. Claire nodded, feeling both relief and despair. Their love had survived, but it was irrevocably changed. Silence had ended. Truth had arrived, and now they had to rebuild from the fragments. In that moment, the twins slept peacefully between them, unaware of the storm their birth had caused. And Claire realized that some endings are neither happy nor fully sad. They are simply the beginning of a new reality, shaped by survival, truth, and the quiet resilience of hearts that choose to stay together, even when trust has been shattered. Weeks passed and the hospital gave way to home. Ethan's initial shock slowly transformed into a cautious attempt to understand. He spent hours watching the twins sleep, noting their tiny hands and curious movements, realizing that no matter the circumstances, they were innocent lives dependent on both of them. Claire, meanwhile, tried to adjust to her new reality as a mother of twins while wrestling with lingering fear and guilt. They developed a tentative routine. Feeding, changing, rocking, and night wakes became the rhythm of their new life. Ethan still asked questions, sometimes sharply, sometimes softly, about the past. Claire answered cautiously, revealing only what she felt necessary. Each exchange chipped away a little of the wall between them, though mistrust still lingered in the silent spaces. Claire watched Ethan slowly rediscover the depth of his love for her and the babies. He laughed at the smallest things, marveled at each milestone and sometimes, in quiet moments, apologized for his initial anger. These moments offered Claire small relief, reminding her that forgiveness, though difficult, might be possible. The past haunted her less frequently, replaced by exhaustion and wonder. Motherhood, she realized, was not only about joy, it was about survival, endurance, and small triumphs. Each smile from the twins, each soft coo, reminded her that life could still offer moments of beauty, even after terror and deception. Yet, she remained cautious with Ethan, understanding that trust had been fractured. She knew the path ahead would require honesty, patience, and courage, qualities she had discovered in herself only after facing the darkest hours. For the first time, she allowed herself a small measure of hope, that even broken hearts could learn to beat together again. As the weeks turned to months, Ethan began to see the twins not as symbols of betrayal, but as the living proof of life's resilience. Their laughter, the way they clutched his fingers, and the gentle weight of their heads on his shoulder slowly softened the sharp edges of his anger. Claire noticed these changes, feeling a cautious warmth begin to thaw the cold fear she had carried for so long. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the twins slept, Ethan held Claire's hand. "We've been through hell," he said softly, "but we're still here. I can't promise everything will be perfect, but I want to try, with you, with them." Claire met his gaze, seeing both the scars and the love reflected there. They shared a long silence, a moment where words were unnecessary. The past was never erased, and the trauma she had endured would always remain a part of her, a shadow she could not deny. But the present was theirs to shape, and slowly, carefully, they began to imagine a future where love, though tested, could survive. Claire realized that strength wasn't about forgetting or undoing the past. It was about living despite it. She squeezed Ethan's hand, whispering, "We'll figure this out together." His smile was tentative but real, a fragile bridge spanning the gap between pain and hope. Over time, laughter returned to their home, punctuated by the coos and giggles of the twins. They created routines, celebrated milestones, and slowly rebuilt trust, not the naive trust of the past, but a deeper, harder-earned bond. They learned that love, when tested by fire, could emerge scarred, but alive. Claire finally allowed herself to see the twins as gifts rather than reminders of horror. Their presence became a force that demanded resilience, compassion, and patience. In caring for them, she found a measure of redemption and a renewed sense of purpose. Ethan, too, embraced this new reality. The twins were the living proof that life could surprise, challenge, and ultimately heal. While the shadows of betrayal and fear never fully vanished, they became part of the texture of their lives, threads in a complex tapestry they were learning to navigate together. By the time the first year ended, the couple had learned a fragile, imperfect balance. Love was no longer simple, happiness no longer absolute, but life persisted. They survived the impossible, endured what few could imagine, and emerged on the other side, not unscathed, but together. In the quiet moments, with twins asleep between them and hands clasped tightly, Claire and Ethan understood a fundamental truth. Some endings are not purely happy or sad. They are lessons in survival, resilience, and the quiet courage it takes to continue, even when the world has broken you.